In the United States, if you wanted to know what a given city, county, state agency, local government unit is spending, it's not actually publicly available. The only way to get government spend data is to send what's called a Freedom of Information Act request.
Why is it impactful for startups?
If you were a founder and you said, how do I go solve homelessness and turn it into a business? You would literally have to spend like 6 months of gathering data and submitting FOIAs and hiring consultants. But I want more founders to go and build the Palantirs, the SpaceXs, the companies that transform outcomes for people. And that's what Starbridge wants to be. We want to be the infrastructure company for these companies that align purpose with profit and really inflect outcomes in the public sector.
What's your take right now on competition in this vertical AI world?
I do think these markets are more competitive than ever. And I really do believe that what Paul Graham always said, you're never going to die because of competition. It's going to be because of yourself is still true.
Fresh off his Watermill Cup victory, we've got founder and CEO of Starbridge AI, Justin Wenig. Welcome to Change Order.
Thanks for having me, Jason. That is my biggest accomplishment, so I really appreciate it.
I don't know. I was thinking about your biggest accomplishment maybe as having the best LinkedIn photo, a nice sweaty LinkedIn photo that seems to get more engagement than any other LinkedIn post I've ever seen, which if you're editing this, please bring that up. Can you just tell me the story behind that photo, please?
Yeah, so a little bit about, maybe it's a good way to introduce myself to the audience, a little bit about my background. So I dropped out of Columbia University, founded my first company called CourseDog. We built kind of back office software for higher education, budgeting, scheduling. Was really fortunate, got to grow the company over 5.5 years and had a 9-figure kind of exit to a private equity firm about 2.5 years ago before starting this next company. There is this photo. So for those of you that look me up, you'll see them. I'm quite the influencer on LinkedIn. Don't forget to give me a follow. But there is this photo on LinkedIn that we like to use again and again of me kind of sweating all the way through my shirt. So this was actually like the final conference before I stepped away at CourseDog. And I figured why not make it as fun as we could. So we had this big, CourseDog, we had this big blue dog mascot. I'm running around in for 3 hours. I'm sweating, all the way. And then we just decided to do this big dance party at the end of our kind of annual user conference. And there's this kind of beautiful photo of me kind of galloping through the dance floor, like looking like I just went through like a water park. And we just like to repost it every couple of months to keep us top of mind. So
it's amazing. I mean, it definitely stands out from the crowd of other ghost-written LinkedIn content. That's for damn sure. Well, now you're back at it. You have a new company. So can you just give a quick description of what Starbridge AI is?
Yeah, so what we do at Starbridge is we use AI to analyze government spending. So on the business side, we help revenue teams at some of the largest government technology companies and physical services companies to understand and predict their next customer. So we look at data where we have the largest kind of purchase graph of government spend data to see when are upcoming contract expirations going to happen. And we layer on other signals like grants and meeting mentions that are really relevant to kind of government revenue teams. And we use AI to turn these into actionable workflows so that teams can say, find me my next best customer. And we now work with over 100 companies in the space, from the largest size, like publicly traded, Instructure, Lind, Federal Signal, to many kind of, fast-growing startups like, a Zen City, or many early stage. Most of the YC batch GovTech companies use our software. That's on the business side. We also now have a very fast-growing kind of government practice where governments are actually using our spend data to benchmark their own spend. So think about a lot of what you've heard about with Doge, where governments have this growing interest to understand how they spend money. We actually have the largest database of kind of government spend data in the United States. It's actually extremely hard to get this. We employ people in 15 states that are manually making Freedom of Information Act requests to get huge amounts of data on what governments are actually spending. And then we bring that data back to governments so they can make more informed decisions about the way that they spend money.
That's pretty wild. I feel like when the first time I met you, we had a conversation about Freedom of Information Act requests, and I feel like you are the Freedom of Information Act guy. What is the Freedom of Information Act, and why is it impactful for startups?
So I'm going to look straight at the camera so that the camera can see me in kind of all my beauty. And so, believe it or not, in the United States, if you wanted to know what a given city, county, state agency, local government unit is spending, it's not actually publicly available. The only way to get government spend data is for 95% of the 110,000 state, local, and educational units in the United States is to send what's called a Freedom of Information Act request. So, what is a Freedom of Information Act request? A Freedom of Information Act request is basically me going to a government or an individual going to a government, going through a kind of tedious, arduous process of maybe submitting giving them your ID, maybe submitting a fax, maybe filling out a PDF form, and literally making a request saying, hey, can I get your purchase data? So you might ask the question, why is this information not public? And this is actually from a policy perspective, independent of our business. I'm a huge advocate that spend data should actually be public in the United States. Unfortunately, it's not. And that was kind of one of the principal reasons why Starbridge exists. The reason why it's not public is for a few reasons. The first is that you think back to World War II when these kind of government documents started to become more public. There are obvious reasons why some government documents can't be public, right? If someone signs a missile contract, you really don't want that to be public, and have that information be potentially leaked to U.S. adversaries, right? What ended up happening over time is that businesses and lobbyists of products and services that really had nothing to do with national security effectively lobbied to say, hey, we should have the ability to redact kind of privileged IP if it's asked for. So, a business that sells pencils, in theory, has protection under US law so that you can't see the contracts that the government is seeing with pencils unless they have the opportunity to kind of redact in certain states. And it's become this very bifurcated landscape where in different states, there's different kind of openness to making this data accessible to the public. Now, ultimately, after making one of these requests and submitting in certain states that you're US citizens and other things of the sort, this information is actually public and it's actionable. There's two different ways of getting the information. One is like just getting a transaction history. So think of like every dollar that the US sends in imagine you got like a giant, you guys are Brex, right? Or you guys, yeah, Brex report. We're not going to talk about the competitor because I have many friends at Brex, but think of this like a Brex transaction history of everything that the government's spending. And that's one way to get the data. The second way, which is more difficult, is to actually get contract level data. So think of this as like the actual signed contract that Workday has with its partners in every city and county in the country and the proposals that have been submitted. And there's two very different workflows to get this kind of data from the government. Contract data is much, much more difficult than transaction history. But really where Starbridge initially developed our product market fit is we became the first company that was able to figure out, how do I actually create a graph of all of my competitors and all of a market ecosystem's contracts and contract expirations? And this data is obviously unbelievably useful to businesses because if you sell, let's say, like my last company, software for budgeting and higher education, knowing when all my competitors' contracts expires is unbelievably useful. Predominantly because by US public procurement laws, you're almost legally obligated to look at new solutions before you go to a renewal. So that's a little bit of the history and kind of where Starbridge initially kind of got our product market fit.
I want to double click on something you just said. I think the Freedom of Information Act and the way to commercialize that as a founder is the most underutilized resource for go-to-market possible.
Yep.
How did you get into this? How did you use it when you were running CourseDog?
Yeah. So at CourseDog, we grew to 35 sellers, 8-figure annual run rate, growing, fast growing company, and what we basically observed was that the going cost of getting transparency into the government market is unbelievably high. Being able to create this graph, we literally had to, employ a bunch of folks, have a whole team on Upwork going and submitting these requests in bulk to try to get this information. You then also have to pay some of these governments. There's processing fees, there's state fees, there's just a lot of back office compliance around that. My other observation was that almost everything in the government's a public market, but it's just the most obscure market in the world. Everything from getting good contact data on government to understanding what they're talking about when they appropriate budgets is just a nightmare. And we spent, literally millions of dollars a year revenue operations costs to kind of piece together visibility. I was really lucky. I had a great exit in my last company. I wasn't in this to build another business. For me, what this was about was I believe I want to live in a world where more folks go and innovate on core government and education outcomes that really matter to people. You think about housing affordability, infrastructure, homelessness, transportation, our educational system, and opportunity for our kids. All of these live and die by the public sector and educational institutions. And I'm at heart a capitalist. I believe that private businesses have unbelievable opportunity to partner with the public sector to actually inflect these outcomes. And I think it's a shame that, and what got me so excited about this business is that if you were a founder and you said, how do I go solve homelessness and turn it into a business? You would literally have to spend like 6 months of gathering data and submitting FOIAs and hiring consultants and going through budget documents to create that complete picture. I want to live in a world where more founders don't build boring, no offense, horizontal SaaS products. But I want more founders to go and build the Palantirs, the SpaceXs, the companies that transform outcomes for people. And that's what Starbridge wants to be. We want to be the infrastructure company for these companies that align purpose with profit and really inflect outcomes in the public sector.
It's a really, really powerful vision when I think about it. However, you have a bunch of companies that are still going to have to sell into government. So one question that I imagine most people have on their minds after seeing things like Doge, for instance,
Yes.
is Trump actually going to make government procurement easier?
Maybe controversial, but regardless of politics, I think that Doge and what the federal government has done in terms of cutting spending in areas that frankly no citizen voted for, and B, in terms of making government spending a popular issue again to many, many voters, I think is borderline heroic. Could you imagine going into a federal bureaucracy where you've got, there's literally over the last 20 years in the United States, it's been completely unpopular to cut spending. Spending increases every year. You've got many extremely good, hardworking folks that work for the government, and every area of the government has some meaning to some group of people, and then going in and saying, I want to cut spending. It's not a surprise that this is unbelievably hard. And I think it's a shame that in the media, they've made it like everything that Doge does is, this and that. I've yet to see that many public reports or any credible public report that talks about the outcomes that have really been impacted in the United States. So I understand there's an argument globally why we shouldn't cut spending, why there's real people that need help in other countries. But I've yet to see a credible argument in the United States that some group of people have really been disenfranchised by kind of Doge and what Doge is doing. But more broadly, it's just an inspirational point. Like, people do not understand until they work with the government directly, I think in a way of, many times they're company founders, many times they're consultants, how inefficient and bureaucratic these organizations actually are. It has nothing to do with the folks on the ground. It has everything to do with the fact of the way that money gets appropriated oftentimes, like in state local education, is literally use it or lose it budgets. So think of this as like, I work for a random city in Wyoming, okay? The way that 90% of governments appropriate money is literally you get a budget amount. If you spend all that amount, great. You know, you get maybe more the next year. You make an argument for more the next year. If you don't spend that amount, it's gone. It's literally gone. And you think about political incentives, people, the way that politics work in the United States, bigger budgets, more impact. So why would anyone, there's no incentive in a government system to cut waste, okay? And I believe the reason why cutting waste is really important is not only because we have a big deficit, but because it enables us to put more money toward entrepreneurship and innovation and some of these problems that have just gone unsolved in the United States for 50, 70 years. Think of, mental health and homelessness. And so I'm so passionate about this. And I personally think that there's been a lot of good work that's gone on at both the federal and the state local level with some of the partners that we're working with that I think has been really powerful.
I don't want to go too deep into this, but I am curious. Have you thought about different incentives that could be introduced to solve what you're talking about?
Well, I have a lot. I think I don't want to make it into a big political thing, but I think one of the big ones is if you see what Vivek Ramaswamy has talked about in Ohio of actually making public spending on the blockchain and make it public. At first, a lot of people think this is kind of like a hilarious idea, like put spending on the blockchain. I don't know what that means. I'm not like a Bitcoin guy. But like again, like it's hard to cut stuff if like it's not public and transparent. Like, duh. Like, I just don't get why more people don't talk about this. Like, you go to your local city, it's like, what are you spending? It's like, oh, like I can't figure this out. Like, it's like, okay, like, well, that's probably the obvious why like we can't figure out what to cut. So like. That's like my biggest kind of policy advocacy. I think there's a lot of other stuff that is really important. So I think that some states have done an amazing job tying funding to outcomes. I think this sort of incentive-based funding is incredibly effective and attractive. I think that...
Imagine if we had a world where you got incentive based off of outcomes where government employees could make significantly more money. I mean, when you think about some of the innovation that's happened in the private sector, employees are incentivized all the time not to spend a bunch of money on travel. And there's been companies that have popped up that help them book travel at a more cost-efficient rate and then get some of that upside. And I do wonder if we could actually create a system where you can actually measure that and then implement it to give more
Totally.
upside. You might even get, by the way, more talented people to go to work in government.
100%. And look, one of the things I find inspiring, again, I'm not making this about politics, about Doge, is like some of the people that are working for the federal government right now are like people that would have never worked for the government. Like, I don't think folks realize, like, we crazy underpay government servants. And these people work really hard, right? Like they work so freaking hard and crazy hours, totally thankless job, basically doing customer support tickets from people that, are late, that, from whoever is the loudest citizens, in every city or county, there's like 10 people. There's just a huge pain in the butt, and they just want to come and complain about everything, and like that's basically their job, and they work crazy hours, and they're, it's exhausting and thankless. And you go look in the federal government now. There are some really talented people that like used to work at amazing companies, Tesla, SpaceX, great private equity firms that have gone and worked there. And I think this is a huge part. Like if we could create a system where people feel motivated and incentivized to drive outcomes in the public sector, and hopefully they could get paid 100 times more money, I just think we'd be in a much, much better world. Yeah.
That could be an interesting platform for you to run on after this one.
I'm not interested in running for office. I'm purely trying to. This is purely my own personal opinions.
Well, if I'm sitting here and I'm listening to this, I think one company for people that know startups that's probably coming to mind is OpenGov.
Yes.
How does Starbridge differ from OpenGov?
Oh yeah, so we don't even do, so OpenGov is an amazing company. We're not even remotely close to OpenGov. So all that we do, so we really have kind of, we help on the vendor side. OpenGov isn't on the vendor side. And then we just have really interesting, unique kind of spend benchmark data in our platform. And we don't, so we're actually, if anything, like, we don't compete at all with it. I think OpenGov is one of the most magical and amazing companies. So we don't do the budgeting, the reporting, the workflow, the procurement system. We purely just have a really deep and rich kind of spend graph and spend benchmark graph. And we also help, like OpenGov doesn't do federal. We're helping now federal agencies with some of these problems. But OpenGov is not and won't ever be a competitor of ours. They're actually I'm the CEO, Zach Bookman, and I are quite good friends, and he's actually investing in the Starbridge round this round. So
Interesting.
amazing company, amazing company.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. I think when I think about Starbridge, I think about go-to-market tooling. I
Yeah.
think about a revenue driver, but I also think about a really complex market with very different types of end customers and even different types of contracts.
Yeah.
And so there are some deals, right, that are direct.
Yeah.
And then there are these things called cooperative contracts.
Yeah.
Can you just help us understand, like, what is the difference? Like, what are the different types of deals here, and how does Starbridge kind of play a role in those?
Yeah. So another really interesting kind of, for our average, for our average listener, really interestingly, in the United States, there are a variety of companies that do more than $1 billion of gross profit a year that are called government resellers. And these companies have kind of two things that they do. So the first is they literally go sell Microsoft or Citrix or Cisco into the government or federal government. Okay. And that's kind of one part of their business. A second part of their business, which is kind of this just really unique ecosystem, is about taking skim fees on contracts from businesses that want to transact with the government. So here's how it works. In the United States, there are these things called cooperatives. Cooperatives, think of, if for those of you that are financial folks, since I know probably a lot of financial folk are watching this, trying to figure out their next, their alpha and, getting there with their suit and tie and, figuring out how to make good investments.
Make more money.
Yeah,
more money.
make that dollar bill. What a cooperative is, think of it as like the gap accounting of doing a contract with the government. If you get on a cooperative contract, what it means is that a group of governments has all agreed, they've come together, they've said, you can buy off of this contract. You don't have to go through a formal tender. You don't have to negotiate the T's and C's. Like, this is like the TSA pre-check of interacting with the government. Now, what makes these cooperatives super complicated is that there are literally hundreds of cooperatives in the United States, and there is different governments agree to be bound by different cooperatives kind of agreements. So what this means is that in Texas, if you wanted to transact in Texas, you should use Texas DIR agreement. But if you're in New York, you should use the New York OGS agreement. Now, what makes this really tricky is that getting on these cooperatives is honestly a nightmare. I mean, you go on a bid, they happen once or twice a year. You basically sign up for a giant compliance exercise. It's like a nightmare. And so there's all of this huge amount of back office costs to kind of get on these underlying cooperatives, even though they give you kind of a highway through government procurement. Now, where resellers come in is they've gotten on all of these cooperatives over time. And so they go to businesses and they say, hey, you can use our contract vehicles that we have as a reseller, and this will be your highway straight to procurement. So you think about companies like Carasoft, it's a $20 billion a revenue company, $1 billion gross profit a year. It's an unbelievable business. And a huge part of that business is about providing this kind of super highway to contract with the government, right? Now, our view at Starbridge is kind of that, first, this ecosystem is super murky. So most companies that enter it are like, wait, like I'm like paying this tax to like some random business I like found and heard about in order to like contract. Like, is this legal? Like, how does this work? It's like a very weird ecosystem. So the first thing that we recently launched, for those of you that follow my LinkedIn, is what we call our procurement hell summary and angel procurement analysis summary, which basically documents for every government agency what is the best procurement highway to get through them, and additionally gives a summary of who is the best reseller, cooperative, or strategy to break into a government agency. We'll always have competitors, but for better or for worse, I think we're the first company that's ever done this. It's actually unbelievably complex because you have to document all these relationships that governments have with cooperatives and et cetera, et cetera. So long story short, if you want to do a government deal, we have this amazing deal on how to superhighway through procurement. And then the second way that we're starting to interact with this ecosystem is to actually kind of put contract vehicles on platform for our companies. So think about how kind of Deal or Rippling has this kind of like, you could either go to PEO or payroll. We think for our companies that they might want to get on underlying cooperatives or use these contract vehicles at different times in their journey. When you're early on, you might want to use like the superhighway, use a reseller. It's oftentimes more expensive to do that. As you scale, you might want to get on these underlying cooperatives in the same way, like it becomes worth it to file the state taxes directly because you don't want to pay the markup on the PEO. And we're basically building all into our software platform the ability to help businesses operate all of that compliantly. Think of it as like Deal Shield or Vanta, kind of this compliance autopilot helping you to make these best decisions on the right way to transact with governments.
See, I find it interesting that you describe yourself as an infrastructure company, because as you explain this, the first thing that kind of comes to my mind is you are essentially the head of revenue for the government arm of any business that wants to sell into the government. Because historically, companies, when they've spun up a team to go out and sell into government, they've brought on somebody who has the experience, so they know that they need to go get the FOIA requests. They know that they should go in under a cooperative or that they should go in directly. They know who to sell to. They know what the messaging should be, how to fill out the RFP. Like, why is it that you're describing it as an infrastructure play?
Every company in the government space, if you ask them, do you have transparency into the government market? They would say, absolutely not. It's a nightmare. Like prioritizing accounts, scoring, figuring out what's the best account, figuring out the best procurement. It's really, really, really challenging. And really, our mission is nothing short but providing that super highway to government contracting for many of these companies. So everything under the sun of any problem that a company has doing business with the government, like long term, think about lobbying, think about the legislation and how companies can influence legislation. You think about there's another whole thing in government and consortiums and getting on grants. We just want to be the one-stop shop for making it seamless and simple and transparent to do business with the government.
So do you guys end up disrupting a large chunk of Salesforce's business then?
It's a good question. As of right now, we're not as interested in the CRM directly. So, we kind of think ourselves as the CRM is becoming more of this just like ultimate audit tracking system, and all of that system of action that sits above that workflow is really where Starbridge fits in. Long term, I think people have really different opinions on where the CRM is going. I don't personally have an opinion on that right now. I can see a world where Starbridge becomes a CRM itself, and I can see a world where tools like Salesforce and HubSpot become even more indispensable parts of the stack. Like we have very deep Salesforce and HubSpot integrations at Starbridge, and so long term, it's really hard to tell. I don't know.
So are you long?
Am I long?
Salesforce and HubSpot? This is not financial advice, but I am curious.
Since I'm sure my advice will, significantly move the markets, I'm sure that, all these quantitative firms are kind of tracking this transcript. They're looking out for me for my advice. I don't want to move the markets too much tomorrow, but I would say that because Brian Halligan's a good friend and mentor of mine, the HubSpot founder, I'm super long on HubSpot, and Salesforce I'm long on if we make a sale to them.
Love that. I love that.
So you can reach out, Salesforce PubSec team, if you want me to move the market anytime, and you guys want to work with us.
I mean, the secret. You're just gonna have to go and ping Mark Benioff, tell him you meditate, which we'll get into.
Hawaii, I love Hawaii. Some people say I even look a little like Benioff, which I consider a huge compliment. I think he's a very beautiful man.
Baby Benioff, but a little shorter. A little more fit, maybe.
Who's shorter, Benioff or me?
You.
I'm shorter. I'm like 6 feet. Is he? How tall is he?
I'm pretty sure Benioff's like 6'6".
Oh, okay.
He's a towering man.
Okay. I don't want anyone here to think I'm like too short or anything.
No. But Benioff's definitely got height on you.
Okay. Got it. All
right. So you're talking about the agentic operating system and the actioning system on top of the CRM, then.
Yeah.
And specifically focused on government.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, when they hear that, and it's like, okay, you're not going to own the system of record. You're not going to own the data. Where does the defensibility come from? What's your take on that?
Let me give you like 3 different takes that I believe all of them, okay? One is, have you seen like the dimwit meme of like, is it like a good it's like, on one side is like the defensibility is like impossible, and then the other one's like, is it a good company and is ARR growing? And then the other side is like, so one is like the dimwit argument is like, if I'm like growing really fast, and if I believe that the company that's one step ahead of the pack will continue to be one step ahead of the pack because it's building the right team, then my defensibility is that I'm one step ahead, right? Like, I think that's in general a pretty good argument, right? Let's go out of the dimwit argument and go to more of like the tactical argument, right? So you look at like, what's that famous book, the Five Powers or whatever, the one that people always cite on defensibility. I think obviously you look at brand is going to be, it will continue to be very important, right? People, seeing me, hearing my trauma of selling to the government, seeing my kind of flowing hair, hopefully some of my listeners resonate. I think obviously for some period of time, like we've got this unbelievable graph of government spending that is really a human services thing. Like we've got 14 people that are literally in the business of calling governments and developing relationships to get this data. So we kind of have a data advantage, right? And then look, I think like for us, like all in one, right? Like the best, B2B SaaS companies at the end of the day become all in one, right? And we're going to be this all in one infrastructure play. We're not just going to be data or work, we want to own the whole kind of go-to-market revenue workflow for these types of companies. And over time, we hope that teams will be able to be much more efficient. You look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and how many people are in sales and this and that. We'll build agentic systems that enable teams to operate much more efficiently and give superpower to folks that are incredible at their job in kind of government and education sales, right? Let me give you my, just for the sake of transparency, my third more like sinister, unclear argument, okay? My deep gut feeling, independent of Starbridge for a lot of these companies, is that what you're seeing right now is just this unprecedented. I mean, I won't be able to share on this podcast unless I'm paid enough money, but our growth rate is just unbelievable. I mean, compared to my last company, which had a great exit, I mean, we're growing faster in the year that we sold the company. We're going to do more revenue bookings in the year I sold the company in the span of a couple of months. I mean, it's crazy, right? And and my sense is that so many companies right now are experiencing just unprecedented growth. And my sense is what's going to happen is we are entering this kind of golden age horizon where more companies than ever are just going to be growing faster and printing profit faster than is ever expected. I think what's beyond the horizon are 2 major risks. The first is that models just get so commoditized and so cheap that the cost of inference through companies like Etched, which both you and I are an investor in, Gavin, I love you. The cost of inference effectively goes to zero, and then SaaS in general and vibe coding and like SaaS in general just gets super commoditized. I don't know what happens in that world. Like I totally believe, like if you ask me 15 years from now, could you vibe code, like any B2B SaaS app? The answer might be yes. I think the counter argument is like one step ahead, and like we'll see, time will tell which one will win. The other one that's unclear to me is just like, I do think there's like a non-trivial probability that all SaaS and software in the, again, 15-year time horizon gets commoditized just purely by OpenAI and the big foundation model players. Like, I think that I think there's a non-trivial probability of that happening. And so I think the best framework for like myself and for companies right now is like what Sam Altman says. He says like, well, hopefully you're on the side of you're doing better if the models get better, right? But my sinister view that I think we all need to watch out for is like, well, what happens if they get super better, right? Like all of our companies are founded on some limit to what we think models will do, right? We all don't believe that everything that we've done will go away in a day. And I think that, we'll just all need to continue to monitor that. So
I think it highlights the need to move fast right now.
yes.
And if you're getting the market pull the way that you guys are, 1, 2, you're actually exemplifying like true ROI,
Yes.
which is incredibly powerful. Three, it then like leads to this world in which your switching costs are becoming higher
Yep.
because like more and more people are using the software internally. Like ripping that thing out is going to be super hard. And like there are people inside of your company that live day to day thinking about how can I make this product 10x better for the end user.
Yeah.
Whereas right now, the model companies, whether it be OpenAI or whether it be Anthropic, these companies are sitting there and they're like, how do I make something like general purpose really good that's horizontal? But I, Jason, if I'm using Anthropic, need to think about what features do I want to
Yep.
tell the system to create for me. So right now it's a pull model. Eventually, if we get to a like push model where Anthropic says, hey, here's a way that we can make your product 10 times better. And by the way, we're using AI voice calling to already collect all those
Yeah.
FOIA notices. Then I get a little more nervous. But historically speaking, like churn is not that high in enterprise SaaS.
Yeah.
And so something is going to have to happen that's like a true earthquake in order for me to believe that a bunch of these defensible moats are not going to actually exist.
I think that's a really good point, and it's been crazy. Like we, for whatever, I don't know how it's possible, but like again, we're we're growing very fast. We'll all announce in a little bit, but we've had great revenue track. Like we haven't had a single customer churn. I don't know how that's like. It's been very very interesting. I think we have a great product, obviously, and hopefully by the time this podcast is published, it's still true. But I definitely believe in that. I also, and again, this is not a Starbridge marketing thing, but I think that humans are just unbelievably bad at predicting the future and seeing beyond the horizon. My sense is that the variance of everything is just so much higher than it's ever been before in this AI market. And I think that founders, operators, investors just need to be eyes wide open about how big that variance actually is, in my opinion.
It's totally fair. And I feel like not only are companies growing faster than they ever have before, but so is competition.
Yeah.
What's your take right now on competition in this vertical AI world?
Yeah, so we're weirdly really lucky. So we have almost no competition. We have legacy competitors, like companies that were around pre kind of 2005 that offer kind of some FOIA related services, or but for whatever reason, like we've picked enough of a niche. There's for better or for worse, there's not that many people that are that passionate about government sales and government procurement. I think that through my first company, I just learned so much about this. I developed a maybe freaky kind of affiliation to it, but
And you're a bit of a masochist.
and I'm a
but-
bit of a masochist, exactly, which we can talk about later. But I think that the in general for vertical SaaS and for competition, I do think these markets are more competitive than ever. And the at the same time, I really do believe that what Paul Graham always said, I went through IC in my last company, like you're never going to die because of competition. It's going to be because of yourself is still true in most places, right? I personally get more worried about competition in markets and companies that have unbelievably viral and crazy viral growth. Like you think about like the Lovables, the vibe coded apps. Like I actually think that I'm less bullish on those long term, because if the barrier to entry is basically zero, you do have one step ahead. But also, OpenAI, Anthropic can always decide that they want to go after that market and be one step ahead themselves, and they'll have better models, and then you'll be done, right? I think in vertical SaaS, it's still going to be true that competition isn't going to kill most companies. Yeah.
It's really interesting to hear. I feel like as we sit here today, there are more and more companies that are competing in vertical SaaS, selling into the same customers.
Yeah.
And at least what I saw like 5 years ago in identity, I guess more influencer marketing than identity theft protection, but in the influencer marketing space, there was 150 companies that were funded in a 5-year span.
Yeah.
And when our company at the time was selling into customers, we were running into, 5 or 10 other companies. And
Right.
each one had somewhat similar features, but maybe they approached it slightly differently. Or by the way, like the marketing person who was buying that software just joined the company and used a different software tool at their last company. And then it ended up just like A, driving customer acquisition costs up a ton. B, it drove churn up a ton. And then C, it kind of just confused the market from like an approach perspective. But in terms of at least a lot of the products that we're seeing across other verticals, most of the products look the same, they smell the same, they taste the same to start with a wedge, an AI wedge. But over time, that's probably where you're going to see things splinter. Because somebody's going to want to take one path and then the other company's going to want to take the other path.
Yeah, I do think that. So, I was really fortunate. So we sold my last company to JMI Equity, which is an unbelievably good, I would highly recommend, kind of vertical SaaS private equity investor. And I got to, it was actually an amazing experience, like getting to see how a really built out growth equity. So they're not in the EBITDA business; they're in growth. They want to invest in fast growing vertical SaaS companies and bring them to the next chapter. And there were a lot of really interesting learnings that I made about, that I learned through them about vertical SaaS. I mean, one of them is like, look, great vertical SaaS companies can win 50% of markets. Like, it actually is a lot of the time, a winner take all kind of, or duopoly kind of thing in vertical SaaS, which I thought was really, really interesting. So there is this factor of like, you're only going to have one or two of them in the long run win. Who knows with AI, maybe that plays out differently. Some of the other ones were like, I mean, there were, I could talk more about them, but
I'm curious. Double click on a couple more.
Couple more. I have a bunch. Another one is what I call the I'm a vertical SaaS founder. I'm going to get on my high horse and not overinvest in sales headcount persona. So let me play out this argument for you. So I'm a vertical SaaS founder. I'm in, education, or maybe I'm in industrials, or I'm in mining. The high horse argument is like, oh, like I don't need sales headcount to scale my industry, because my industry, everyone needs to be warm intros and I need to meet them at conferences. And with AI, I don't need sales reps anymore and this and that. I think this is like the most common mistake actually that early stage vertical SaaS founders make. They go on their high horse. I know I talked to one person in the industry who said, and it's total BS. Like at CourseDog, to give you all a sense, like after we transitioned the company to JMI, and I'm still on the board, I'm still a major shareholder in the company. I talked to JMI, they were like, you guys should grow sales headcount. I was like, oh, I was doing the argument. I was like, well, they don't have enough pipeline and this and that. Like, we did it and it just totally worked. And like the framework that pulled me out of it was like, I always ask founders, I'm like, if you woke up tomorrow and I said to you, you are just a mercenary going and trying to make sales and you can't edit the product, that's all you are. Could you pay back your headcount cost? And they would all say, yeah, of course, I'd like pay it back multiple times over, whatever. And I'd be like, so what's your fucking problem? Sorry, what's your fucking problem? Like, you're not smart enough to train someone to go do that thing. Like, so, and like founders get really on their high horse about efficiency. They're like, I want to run an efficient organization and I want it so that I'm going to wait till the product catches up so that 2 sales reps can do what 6 sales reps can do right now. And it's like, if you're running an efficient revenue operation, in my opinion, you're leaving money on the table. Like, revenue should not scale in the same way as engineering teams do. You look at Salesforce. Salesforce, like apparently, you're gonna have to ChatGPT fact check my ChatGPT, but like Salesforce was like majority sales reps in the early days, right? And I still believe that like having an actual built out revenue team, marketing team, sales team early is like one of the best things folks can do in these vertical SaaS markets. You want to be all over the market. You want to be in front of every conference. You want to be showing up like in every one of these vertical SaaS industries. Showing up in person is still the number one thing you can do to convert revenue. And as a founder, you just can't scale that with yourself, right? So that's one of them.
I love that. So when you think about then, let's call it the productivity per rep metric, that's kind of the thing that everyone talks about. Historically, you needed to be at least 3 to 1 in terms of, OTE to earnings. What is the right number then where you would be willing to hire more people? Is it over 3 to 1, or you're like, hey, screw it, we could be 2 to 1, compress it, and that's totally fine, because eventually, as long as we don't grow G&A and engineering a ton, we're going to be able to cover all the costs.
Yeah. investors aren't going to like this. So, but I'll give you my founder answer and then my investor answer. So my founder answer is like most founders, I think, at the stage, assuming you're not in a 50 million a year run rate company, I think most founders in their gut, having a couple of conversations with executives, have a general sense of how they should do hiring. I think more or less I'm a believer. I'm like, if you take these MAGA people, I'm like pro founder. I'm like founders don't need financial modeling. They don't need goals. Like just let them run wild like bucking horses and give them the tools they got and let them do whatever the hell they want. My best framework is what does the founder think should be done? Literally be like double the number of reps and marketing people roughly as they think they need and feel comfortable. Like as a founder, take whatever you think you need, push it beyond the bounds of what you think is possible, roughly like double, or if you're, 1.5x, okay, would maybe be a way of framing it. So that's like my rough, take a bucking horse, put them in a room for a day, have them beat up a couple of their executives, ask them questions, think about the revenue model to get to 8 million, now double that, okay? If you can't double it, do 1.5x. Like that's my rough framework. Because I think whenever I would do these quota capacity models and this and that, it is like that I do think is very different by company. And I think that my experience is that bottoms up forecasting just almost never works. Like people will come up with their own ideas for what they want. People have different incentives. I would rather it be very top down where founders go and get the questions answered that they need to answer, put that together, and then apply a couple of rough mental frameworks about how to do it. So
I'm sure Jay and I loved.
Oh, they love that. Yeah, they're gonna
model.
They're gonna love that I said that. Yeah, no, I'm super close with Jay. Those guys were unbelievably great to work
They
with.
probably have KPIs.
Yeah, they have KPIs. They have OKRs. Like I'm in like the
But you're founder mode again, so it doesn't
I'm
matter.
total founder mode. Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like like I like the bucking horse founder type of archetype. Exactly.
I love that. So your company now, how many sales reps do you guys have?
We're at we have 4 sales reps, a CRO, 2 SDRs, a head of marketing, a head of growth, and a couple more folks that are joining right now after the fundraise.
What's the biggest difference you're seeing between Course Dog and now in terms of like where are the leads and where are the deals coming from? Are you clearly LinkedIn, big guy on LinkedIn. I don't know if that's driving ROI. I mean, I see a lot of people doing it, but I'm curious to get your take.
On LinkedIn specifically?
No, like what are the channels, to make sure that your reps have enough leads and are able to close all this stuff? I mean, at your growth rate from what you and I talked about offline, I'm like, damn, how's that happening?
Yeah, so I think the way that I think about it is like I think SaaS is amazing. Like I think all channels end up working if you actually invest in them properly. And it's better to invest in all channels earlier, but it makes sense in the early days to focus on the 2 or 3 channels that are going to be 80%, right? So for us, it's programmatic outbound. We send our customers, prospective customers, literally data from the app. Hey, you sell gasoline to the city of to Vermont. I don't know if you saw this, but they just talked about having a major energy shortage. Or so we do programmatic outbound at scale. That's been really effective. Actually using the Starbridge application, that's been super effective. The second channel is inbound. So I think inbound, I've basically, hoard myself out on LinkedIn and I post every day. And that's incredibly effective. It keeps you top of mind. For me, it's about being authentic also with our customers. Like, I think being authentic is the most important. I wouldn't recommend, ghostwriting or anything like that. I think you really got to develop your own product channel fit. And then some other ones like AI SEO has been really great for us. The ChatGPT lords have decided that Starbridge is the best, government sales company, and that's been pretty effective as well.
That's really interesting. And so that's at least one of the differences, it sounds like, between your first journey and now. If you were to give yourself advice or somebody else advice starting their first company today, what's the first thing you've done differently with this company that you didn't with the last one?
Yeah, I think I have a lot of them. So one is I think it's better to build teams top down than bottom up. So, and I recognize there's an economic component of this, but here's what I mean. We hired our CRO, CPO, engineering leader, CMO. We did it those are our first hires. I think that there's a lot of advice that's out there that says, well, the founder should start by doing it themselves, and maybe they go hire a more junior person that they like teach, or a hustler or something like that. Um, I'm just a believer that like talent density in the early days is the whole ballgame. And I would rather, a lot of people think that 90% of people think that they're better talent pickers than average. Most early stage founders think they're like these amazing talent pickers. And that's just like statistically not true. My framework was like, I want to get the best freaking people that I could possibly get, who are the best individual contributors that I could possibly imagine. And I want to throw them a lot of money and a lot of equity and a C-suite title and have them be in the founding team of the company. And I will do anything to get these people, right? And that's totally worked, because not only did we have this just mean team of ICs from day one, it also meant that like I didn't have to worry about management or hiring as much as I would have otherwise, because these folks like really knew what they're doing. Now I'll give the caveat, most of these folks had managed folks. Some of them had not. Like some of them were just people that I worked at in my last company that I just knew were 1%, 0.1% personas. And I believed that they would grow into amazing managers. The other reason I believe in this is because I think that people like everyone talks about how important it is to have a co-founder. I think that it's also like you look at a lot of these great companies, they had founding teams where, I like believe every year someone stays at a company, they're truly like, it's like, like the Richter scale of earthquakes, how it's like 10 times better, 10 times better. Like, I think every year someone stays at a company, people underappreciate, they're oftentimes 10 times better. It's not like 1 times better or two or 3% better. I think it's like oftentimes 10 times better, because you kind of need founder level context to make really good business decisions, right? And so for me, not even having a co-founder, I was like, man, like I'd rather have 6 or 7 folks that are effectively founders of this company with me, right? So that's like my kind of first piece of advice to folks that are kind of building. Um,
Do you think you miss anything by not having a co-founder this time around?
No, actually, it's no, because I had a founding team that are effectively co-founders of the company.
If you were a first-time founder again, though, do you think you'd want a co-founder?
I think it's better for first-time founders to have co-founders. In general, I'd like toe the line of the YC advice. Like, I think it is, because I think the journey's hard and you don't know what you're doing, and making decisions to go against conventional advice when you're building this thing for the first time is not, I think, worthwhile. Yeah.
It's like this interesting scale where like you've now been through the gauntlet before.
Right.
You've learned a lot of the lessons. And the reality is that if you have a co-founder and you're a first-time founder, you just have twice the amount of surface area you can cover.
100%.
Whereas now you're not going to make those same mistakes again, and you have rich people problems, which is that like you were able to raise a lot of capital out of the
Totally.
gates.
100%. 100%. I completely agree. Yeah.
So, what advice would you give founders who are fundraising today?
The first one is like, if you have a great company, you'll be able to fundraise. I mean, like, watch what Mark Zuckerberg was like when he was 21 and like pitch. Like, the best advice I ever got actually about fundraising was when I was in YC back in 2020 for my first company. Michael Seibel was like, no ninja tricks. He was like, a lot of founders, they're like, tell me about how I neg the investors and how I, parallel my process in such and such way. Like, all that is ninja tricks, okay? It's going to marginally impact your ability to fundraise plus or minus 2%. 98% of it is going to come down to, do you have a great company, okay? And most founders, like, and by the way, it makes sense. It's like a fear part of your brain, right? Nobody wants to get rejected. You want to be the belle of the ball. But like, for most founders, like, no ninja tricks, just build a great company and fundraising will really come to you. I think there's some basic tenets of fundraising that are useful for first-time founders. The first one being that I always tell founders is like, you should be talking, like obvious stuff, like you should be talking to multiple parties. The reason why I think that is that, what does a good investor do? Like a good investor is genuinely helpful to the founder, but a good investor is going to give you the offer. This is not, you guys could choose to air this or not, but I think what a good investor does is like they find the sliver of offer that is in the acceptable strike zone, but that is not the best offer a founder could possibly get in a totally economically competitive market. Okay. So like, and I say this I oftentimes give this to feedback when I make offers to folks. I'm like, dude, like, don't let yourself get into this situation. Sometimes I even say that. I'm like, but like the best thing you can do to get more feedback about whether or not you have a pitch that's resonating and to get an economically viable offer is like just talk to multiple people in parallel. Have like a real sales funnel. So many founders get cute. There's one, some handsome looking guy like Jason Schumann comes to them and they woo them and they're offering this and that. And before you know it, like you're in a marriage and it's like, what the hell was that? Like, you didn't even talk to multiple firms. You have no idea how bad of an offer you got. Like, it's like you have literally no clue. So talking to multiple firms is super important. The other one is like, just freaking commit to doing a fundraise. Like a lot of these founders, again, they want to get cute. They're like, oh, like I'm not raising. Like, yeah, there's a time when like you meet an investor to coffee if you're really not raising and not raise. But like, it's better net, I think, for most founders to not do this weird like, I'm not raising, I'm waiting for you, this or that. Because again, you just end up in a situation where you happen to drop a little bit more information for one party than another. And then what happens is that party's like, oh, I got the information, I've got a little bit of alpha right now. Here's the worst offer I could possibly imagine that you would accept. So like, just freaking do a process, have parties, say you're fundraising. So those are like the main things I would recommend for a first-time founder.
So I just want to say, by the time this episode airs, your Series A will have been announced, led by a firm that has government ties.
Yeah.
Or did have government ties, depending on how you want to cut
Yeah.
it. How many investors did you pitch in that process?
Not that many. Yeah. So we're really lucky. We just announced we did a $42 million Series A led by Kraft. We had participation from Michael Seibel from YC, Zach Bookman from OpenGov, a ton of customer CEOs, my longtime legal battle partner, the folks over at G&D Gunderson Detmer. So we were, in terms of our process, like I do think it's quite different as a second-time founder. I wouldn't recommend some of the things that I did to most of the audience here. But we did, I did take my own medicine. I had multiple parties that were involved. I said, okay, we'll fundraise, blah, blah, blah. So I'm happy to give some of the second time ninja tricks, but the audience cohort here would not, I don't think it's not advice I would give to your average listener.
No, I think your seed round was the most unique seed round construct I've ever seen. So we don't need to go into that. But we're going to flip you to the other side of the table for a second.
Yeah.
You've angel invested in a lot of companies,
Yeah.
a lot of founders, and a lot of young founders,
Yeah.
including Gavin at Etched.
Yep.
What is it that you're looking for in great founders?
Yeah. It's, I think it's a balance. I like what Michael Seibel, like, they're formidable. That's the best way to describe it. Like, I usually know within 10 minutes of talking to someone if they're formidable. Like, most of the investments I've made have been after, like, basically 10 minutes. I was like, okay, I think I want to invest. I think in terms of, like, cultivating that, it's some function of, hard work, growth mindset, IQ, EQ, and just, like, a little bit of luck in the sense that like I got super lucky. My first company worked when I was 19. Like I've been doing this thing I'm like a vet. I'm like a grizzly old man. You know what I mean? Like your listeners might think I'm like this handsome young buck 28-year-old, but like SaaS Adonis, but probably like a 7 or an 8 on the SaaS CEO scale. But I've been doing this thing for a long time. I'm really lucky. And you gotta put your chips on the table to be able to play the game. And so there's a little bit of luck in that too.
Is there something you look for that, like in a meeting, that says, look, this person's formidable?
It's hard because like I want to give the advice in a way that's actionable, and I don't know how much of it is truly actionable. Like that's my honest answer. I think that some people are truly, born great, and some people work really hard for it and they get there. And, I mean, it's all the stuff you've heard, but like amazing at communicating the vision, right? Being able to explain the company in one sentence, being able to paint. I mean, this is something that I work on with a lot of founders. Like, you got to paint a really big vision for the company. I mean, like, you got to imagine what happens if everything I could ever dream of works out, right? And you got to speak in a way that's like, that's what's going on today, right? I think it's a little bit of chutzpah, it's a little bit of, there's a confidence, it's all that stuff. Yeah.
I think that makes total sense to me. Where does that come from with you? Like, what was that pivotal moment in your life or that pivotal person that kind of brought that out for you?
Yeah, I actually, you know what? I want to give one piece. I want to go back to the last question and give one piece of advice that actually really resonated with me. Again, Michael Seibel, I don't know why he has had a really positive influence on me. Back when I was in YC, to give you all a sense, I had my company Course Dog, we did, at the time, this class scheduling software app. We were like the black sheep of YC. Like, we had like 570K of ARR, like the most ARR in the whole batch. But like, we were this like university class scheduling software company. For those of you investors that are there, you might be like, what the hell? Like, all these YC companies, big TAMs, like our TAM at the time was like 20 million, and we had no thesis. I mean, like, me and my co-founder were so young. Like, I mean, literally, you look at the photos of us, we were 20. Like, we didn't know anything about TAM and markets. We were like, yeah, we're just like doing class scheduling shit for universities. And after the batch, we were like, I mean, literally, like, we had like, it was impossible for us to fundraise. Like, most revenue in the batch, we could not fundraise. After YC, literally, we're down to like, I think it was like 20K in the bank. Like, we were about to run out of money. The company was at millionaire. Like, company's growing. It's just like, we just couldn't communicate in a way that really made sense. And I was on a call with Michael Seibel, and he was like, I was telling him about the company. He's like, okay, like, what's like the biggest like higher ed software? Like, he was like, what's like the biggest higher ed thing? Like, if you were just like, imagine, like, forget about what the company does today. Just like, tell me, like, what is the biggest higher ed thing? And I was like, oh, like, well, like, the student information systems, this thing we integrate with, it's like big back office system, this and that. He's like, you're a student information system. I was like, what? Like, we're not a student information. And he's like, no, like, you're building towards a student information system. And like, I was like, okay, like, yeah, I guess like technically we are like building a student information system. And literally like the next pitch I gave, I was like, yeah, like we're building a modern SIS starting with class scheduling. And like, after that, it was like, legitimately people were like, offer, it was like, boom, 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 boom. It was like, all of a sudden we were hot. And the realization there was just like, you gotta get really good at framing the big fish. You know what I mean? If there's no big fish, nobody's gonna wanna invest. Like, you gotta, and it's honestly this delicate balance, I think, with vertical SaaS founders, because a lot of them don't believe in themselves, and a lot of them truly start in, I mean, markets that are so freaking small. Like, some of these founders, they come to me, they're like, they're doing some like monitoring of industrial security, back office, this and that, but they'll like try to frame it as like the ERP thing. And I'm like, dude, like, I know what's going on here. Like, I know what's really going on. Like, but by the way, like, I get it. Like, I want to back this thing. Like, this is like, I get it. Like, you don't have to like give me the whole. So like, there's kind of this song and dance a lot of the times for these vertical SaaS companies where like, they a lot of times don't even believe in themselves. They just have this little thing and they like started there and then they're like, what's the big thing? But like the big thing that I started to realize, like, you got to actually believe, like, if you're like, you got to believe in the big thing. And like in the day-to-day trenches, every company is a huge shit show. Like, most founders think their company deep down is a donkey. And like, I had that deeply ingrained at Course Dog. My whole time I was like, this thing's a donkey, this thing's a donkey, this thing's a donkey. I'd tell my friends, I'd be like, oh, this thing's going to zero. It's like, so, and I'm like a very optimistic person. I was just like, there's no way this is what it's like for other people. And like, that's just what company building is. Like, you got to have the confidence, the chutzpah. You got to be like, I actually believe. Like, and when you believe, magical things start to happen. I really believe that. Like, we really did build toward this bigger vision. We really did grow, and we really did have this amazing outcome. And it's, you really creating that self-belief of that bigger vision, I think, is super important.
So what is the largest student information system?
Huge company, Ellucian. It's like a $10 billion company. It's like an unbelievably large company that does like, I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but they, Vistone, they probably do, hundreds of millions of dollars of profit a year.
So I have to ask you, if there's a company out there that was, $10 billion plus,
Yeah.
and if I zoom back or zoom out and look back at the course dog exit and the timing of it,
Yeah.
why did you end up making the decision to sell the company?
Yeah, I think it was a couple of things. So the most important one was mission. I think when I started the company as a young founder, for many founders, I think there was a lot of primary motivation points. The first was I wanted to prove myself. It was an ego thing. I wanted to prove myself to my family. I wanted to prove myself to those around me. It was very much like I just want to build a big company, and I really think a big part of it was like feeling. I transferred colleges, feeling like I wanted to be someone. That was a really, really important part of it. A second one was a natural curiosity in terms of just the problem and the problem space. And the third was I just had a deep admiration for my closest friend was my co-founder at CourseDog, Nick. Like we just loved working together, and it was a very beautiful thing. As the company progressed, and I've been meditating for almost an hour a day for 7 years, and my values changed so much. I really came to the realization that the privilege of being a CEO is getting to do and build things and provide livelihoods for people that are not yourself. Like if you continue to think about, like I've always found actually the big fundraising announcements and this and that are the most miserable parts of the journey because you feel so alone. Like people reach out to you, you're like this and that's like me. You don't like, you want to feel like you're creating for others and you're making the world a better place and you're bringing joy in the world. Then I think we had gotten to a really nice inflection point at CourseDog where we had the opportunity to make life-changing money for our employees and our team. I wanted to pursue. I thought our mission was beautiful at CourseDog in terms of helping with the operational effectiveness and graduation rates of universities. And I started to feel that there was, with all the skills I had gained, there was something more that I could do to be transformative and create joy in the world. Then and also my co-founder was at the point where he was like, hey, I think I want to move on to my next thing. And I didn't want to do it without him. Right. And so everything kind of aligned where the metrics were good for the first time. And we kind of made the decision it was a majority sale. So we sold 60% of the company, and we actually didn't even sell 50% in the first, like we believed in the company stock. And I still believe I'm probably the largest individual shareholder in the company. And I'm on the board of directors. But, so that was kind of behind the decision. I'm happy to talk about like the transition, how we got, but honestly, like it was way fucking harder to sell the company than I ever expected. It was probably the most hard, from a mental health, it was the hardest year. I've been really lucky through a lot of meditation. I'm a very joyful, naturally joyful person. And that was the hardest thing I ever went through. It was, there were a couple of things about it. The first was going from, you're grinding every single day to then having that full downtime and not feeling like you have a purpose, not feeling like you're connected to others. As badly as I wanted to go vacation and relax, I just felt like I wanted to create meaning and joy for others. And I felt like I was all of a sudden I was an outsider in the stadium with my money. And it was like, felt that feeling of being an outsider wasn't great. Also, look, people sometimes, I used to watch these people that were multi-time founders, these amazing founders. It's like they just pull great ideas and product market fit out of a hat. And, for me, I thought I wanted to do something, mental health related. I was interested in AI therapy and meditation and brain computer interfaces for, electrical stimulus to the brain to cure depression. I went very deep in all these topics. And I didn't find anything that I thought was a viable business. And I remember at some point I was literally like on LinkedIn, like randomly DMing these embarrassing messages. One day someone will find this like, hey, I'm like this founder with a 9-figure. It was like the biggest like, oh my God. Like if I got this message, I would be like, this is so embarrassing. I'm just randomly DMing these brain researchers. And like it was, and I was like, I realized I like looked at myself in the mirror. I was like, I have no fucking clue what I'm doing. Like I'm totally fucking lost. And I just kind of like broke down. It was really, really hard. And I think that it was slowly, and at the time I was like, I think for many second-time founders, what happens is, my experience is there's kind of this weird kind of thing that happens. So it starts as like jubilant optimism. You've got one idea, whatever it is. And, you know, Josh Koppelman, who invested in my last, amazing guy from First Round, invested in my last company, a good friend of mine. You know, he told me, he met with him, he's like, statistically, the first 5 ideas you're going to think of is not going to be what you're going to end up working on. And that certainly was true for me, right? So you kind of get over that. And then what happens is you you go into, oh, I'm going to do like an incubator of like 12 companies. You know, I'm going to start 10 companies. And this happens almost every second time founder. They're like, yeah, I'm like doing an accelerator. I'm doing 2 companies, whatever it is. And then like, all of a sudden you're like, okay, like what's the first one? Like, it's like, oh, fuck. Like, so like then that kind of always happens. And then you're kind of in this like, holy shit, I'm lost type of thing. And usually what ends up happening is you end up finding more meaning in home, in coming back home to what you initially knew, right? So for me, it wasn't a capitalist imperative to go back to government and education. At the time, I was like, there's no fucking chance I'm going to go back to working with, you know, these fucking people and dealing with these slow cycles and this and that. I was just like, it's not what I want my mission to be stuck in this fucking entrenched, shitty system. But over time, like the best advice I would give to folks that are second time or that are exploring their next idea is like, you got to be really gentle with your thoughts around and your feelings around why you exited and the reasons why you wanted to run away. You know, for me, it was this slow, gentle process of unwinding. At the beginning, it was like, I got to get out of public sector because this thing fucking sucks and nobody ever makes any impact here. And over time, I was like, well, what was it that made me feel frustrated about that? Would there be a way to channel that frustration into something that's more beautiful, that's more connected, where I could take some of the tools I learned to make to like take all the things I was frustrated about and transform them. And I think that it took a lot of time, but over time I started to love it again. And that love really was like the inflection point where I was like, when I had the idea for Starbridge, I was like, okay, I think it's time. It's ready to go.
That's amazing. Are you a TM meditation guy or what kind of
No,
meditation?
I'm more of a Zen meditation guy.
Zen.
Yeah, I just count the breath and
For an hour.
Yeah.
Morning or night?
Mostly in the mornings. Yeah. I've been a little bit on the weaker side recently, but I did, you know, I've probably done, like 8-ish years of like an hour a day. It really has transformed my worldview in a lot of ways.
What time are you waking up?
I wake up at like 6:30. Yeah.
Nice.
And then I'll usually, like, I'll meditate immediately. But again, I've been a little bit sloppy around the fundraise. So, but yes.
Good for you. Well, last couple of quick questions for you.
Yeah.
Rapid fire, in person or remote?
I think it's better to build in person on average. Yeah, I think that in certain kinds of businesses, you absolutely have to build in person. Like if you're doing some new technology thing, you have to build in person. I think for vertical SaaS, a lot of your listeners, it's okay to do, like we do remote back-end engineering. That's just a function of talent. Like we pay these folks extremely well, but I just find it's really hard to recruit in major markets engineering talent. But yeah.
And one question I like to ask everybody: if you were mayor of New York for a day, what's one thing you would change?
Well, I would make spend data public. That would be the biggest one.
There you go. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Justin.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks so
you
much,
and
Jason.
congrats.
Appreciate you carving out a slice of your day to think a little bigger with us. Do me a quick favor. Hit follow, drop a 5-star review, and share the episode with one friend who's equally obsessed with building the future. Huge thank you to the team that makes every release sound effortless. Atomic Growth for the behind-the-scenes horsepower, the brilliant Catherine Thayer for steering our editorial compass, and Devin Natoni for getting each episode into your feed right on time. Their work lets me focus on bringing you candid stories and gritty tactics from the founders, operators, and investors, rewriting entire industries. Until next time, keep challenging the status quo, and I'll see you on the next change order.